I'm going back, way back to before Joe Rogan and David Goggins were brothers, right when they first met. I love this episode. This is episode 1080, David Goggins on the Joe Rogan Experience. And this clip that I'm about to show you is the first time that they sat down together. And Joe learns about who David Goggins is and why David Goggins is the way he is. Let's get into it.
Well, maybe next time.
Next time. Well, I'll catch you after the show. You are a guy that, for a lot of people, you sort of embody the idea of hardening your mind,
Right.
and figuring out a way to do things that most people think are impossible.
Right.
You've sort of become that guy over your life, and you've become that guy for a lot of people, including me, online. We've talked about you on the podcast a ton of times.
Right.
So having you in here has been it's very exciting to me.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
How'd you become that guy?
You know what? I grew up not that guy.
Yeah.
So a lot of people put a title on me. They want to, they see me now. They see me now as the guy that with his shirt off who can do 4,030 pull-ups in 17 hours, who can run 205 miles in 39 hours, who can do all this crazy shit. But what they don't understand is they don't understand the journey that it took me to get to this point. And what got me to this point was I was just the opposite of what I am today. I was that guy who ran away from absolutely everything that I got in front of me. But not many people knew that. I had two people. Like the real me was like this very scared, insecure, stuttering, got beat up by his dad, all this kind of stuff. And then I built this fake person that walked around like my shit didn't stink, you know?
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I did it. And through a process of time, I realized that I was lying to myself and lying to people.
But it's a fascinating journey, though, because you are that guy now.
Right.
I mean, you genuinely are a legit badass.
Right.
And at one point in time, you were a legit terrified person.
Yes.
So what was the process? Like, how did you step forth?
Well, it's a long process.
Right.
My dad beat the shit out of me when I was growing up. I was the first black baby born in this hospital called Miller Fillmore in Buffalo, New York. My dad owned skating rinks, he owned bars, he ran prostitutes from Canada to Buffalo, New York. My dad was a big-time pimp, big-time, anything bad about a person, big-time hustler. He was American, you know that movie with Denzel Washington? Mm-hmm. He was that, but not that bad.
Right.
You know, he wasn't that big, but that's what it reminds me of. He was that kind of guy. And beat the shit out of me, beat the shit out, out of my mom. There was an incident one time when my mom got knocked out on top of the stairs, and he dragged her down the stairs by her hair. And at 6 years old, I'll never forget this. In my mind, I was always afraid. My whole life I was afraid, but I had this fucking voice, this conscience that would always be battling me, saying, hey, you got to get up and do something. I didn't want to do shit. I was just afraid, but that voice would force me to get up. And my dad, I tried to beat him up, whatever, at 6, and I get my ass kicked. So this went on for several years. And I have a big-time learning disability because my dad didn't believe in us going to school. So my dad, it was about the business, the skating rink and the bar. So the skating rink opened about 7 o'clock at night, and this is the time I was able to walk. So about 4, 5, 6 years old, 8, 9, and I'd go to this skating rink at 7 o'clock at night, and I worked the skating rink until 10 at night. And then we would scrape the gum off the floors, and we cleaned the whole skating rink up. And then my dad had an office, and my brother and myself would sleep in the office, and my mom would go upstairs and work the bar until 3 o'clock in the morning. And then they cleaned the bar up. So after all that shit was done with, going to school rarely happened. So when I went to school, I was all kind of, my learning disability, I had social anxiety. I was just a jacked up kid from living in this tortured home. From the outside looking in, we lived in an all-white neighborhood, and then we would travel to the ghetto of Buffalo, New York, where the skating rink was at. So we worked around mostly blacks, and I lived around mostly whites. But no one knew what was going on in that house on 201 Paradise Road. It's crazy. But my mom got courage to finally leave him. When I was about 8 years old, we moved to a small town in Brazil, Indiana, and that's when the real war started for me. And Brazil, Indiana is a small town. Great people, a lot of great people. And I say that because a lot of people get offended. And I'm going to get to the point why they get offended. There was about maybe 10 black families at about 10,000 people in the town. And in 1995, the KKK marched in the 4th of July parade. So this was not everybody was racist. There was a lot of good people. Some of the best people I knew was there, but there was also a lot of racism there. So me being one of the few black kids in that, in that area, it kind of haunts you. I had stuff on my notebook, nigga, we're going to kill you, on my Spanish notebook. They had that on my car, nigga, we're going to kill you. This is early 90s. And so even though I showed it didn't hurt me, it was jacking me up. So all the insecurities I had when I was a kid with my father, I moved into this area here, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And the shit haunted me. And that voice that I talked about, it kept talking louder and louder and louder, but I was doing nothing about it. And I decided to make moves.
Man, I love it. I love it. Like I said, it's episode 1080. There's a link in the description. Man, I love this episode because this is where they become friends. Like, you hear Joe now. He was like, oh, I get messages from David. Oh, I'm talking to David. Like, they're boys now. But this is like Joe was just talking about him, and now he actually gets to meet him, and you can tell Dave is like nervous because he's not talking the same. Like, if you watch him like in this and then his most recent episode, it's like just a world of difference in terms of his comfort level. And he's just trying to build his business right now. It's just like I love it. I love going back like this. And the main thing that stood out to me is that he talked about that voice that wouldn't stop, that he couldn't ignore. He was trying to ignore, but it wouldn't stop. I think we all have that voice. I really do. And I really do think, and I know it sounds like, call it airy-fairy. Joe Rogan will call it woo-woo, that type of thing. But I really do think that voices are higher selves trying to like knock some sense into us, trying to talk some sense into us. Like, I think he was meant to be this person that he is, and he was meant to touch the lives that he's touched. And there was a voice that was trying to push him towards that. That was like, you know what I mean? It's like if I went to the future and I saw you, and you were this billionaire, this philanthropist that was changing the world, and then all of a sudden I came back to this time, you were just a guy sitting on the couch. I'd be like, yo, bro, you get up. You got to get up. And you'd be like, nah, I don't want to, man. Like, what are you talking about? But it's like, but I would know. I'd be like, but you're the guy that changes everything. And you'd be like, I don't want to get up. It's early. It's 10 a.m. It's too early. I really feel like that's our higher selves trying to push us into who we're supposed to be, trying to get us to evolve, trying to get us to step up and step into who we really are. And I think we all have that voice. We all have that voice. Because wherever you're at right now, there is a bigger, brighter, more incredible version of you, just dormant. And if you could just listen to that voice, like, you can make incredible things happen. Things that you've always wanted, things that you've always dreamed of, they're all waiting for you. But they're waiting for that other version of you. This version of you right now, that's not the version that deserves and gets all those things. There's a different version, and you have to really step into it and evolve into it and learn the skills and learn the traits. And man, yeah, that voice. Like, when I was doing drugs all the time, every single time I would go to do drugs, there would always be a voice going, you shouldn't be doing this, man. Without fail, every single time. As soon as I would think about it, I'd be doing it, or I'd be high, and I would just have this voice like, man, you shouldn't be high. You know you shouldn't be high. Every single time. And I would ignore it. Every single time. And it would even be with people, like, oh, you shouldn't be with these people. Like, what are you doing with these people? And I remember a key moment for me, I was at work, and this guy said some really racist stuff to me and a bunch of other guys. And the other guys kind of folded because they were foreign, and they had English was like a barrier for them, and they were just happy to be working. So they would take whatever abuse came. But I didn't. And I remember stepping up, saying something, reporting it to HR, going through the whole process. And I remember, what was that? I remember after I was done doing that, I was leaving and I just started to cry. I just started crying because that voice was like, what are you even doing here? Like, you're better than this. Like, to even be here in this situation where somebody has this power over you, like, what are you doing? And I was just crying and crying. I remember I was just walking to the bus stop, and one of the guys that I helped wanted to pick me up, and I was like, no, I can't. And he felt for me because he could see, I was really upset. And I remember just walking to that bus stop, 10-minute walk, and I was crying the whole way. And it was like a 3-hour commute. It was a really far factory I was working at the time. And the whole bus ride home, I was crying. And then I got onto the next bus and I was crying. And I finally like pulled it together as I was like on my last stint walking home, like a half an hour walk. And then I went to like work out because it was a night shift job. So I would always work out in the morning. I remember I was trying to do push-ups. And I just like broke down and just fell on the ground. I just started crying and crying and crying because I was like, I shouldn't be in this situation. It was like, again, that voice was so loud. It was like, why are you even in this situation? You know how much better you are? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing with yourself? Look at what you're doing. You have to work this night shift job. You're smarter than this. Like, why would you put yourself in this situation where all your money's gone because of drugs? And you've been doing all this illegal activity, so you don't have the proper skills to be in the position that you're supposed to be in. Like, why the fuck have you done this to yourself? And I was just crying and crying. And I remember that was the day that I found Dr. Eric Thomas. He had like a motivational mixtape where he was just, like giving speeches and stuff. And I remember listening to that and I was just like, I have to be better. And I remember from that day on, I was like, I'm going to distance myself from who I have to distance myself from. I'm going to take the steps to get clean, which still took literally like 6 years to get clean from drugs. But I was just like, from then on, my life was just about self-improvement. Like I had to just like focus in on self-improvement, focus in on personal development, focus in on like integrity and making myself better. And I just had to focus in, get away from drugs, get away from that life. But like, I just remember just crying. Like that was, I've never cried so much in one day in my whole life. It was just hours of crying. And I was just like, I can't believe I've put myself here. I can't believe it. I can't believe I have these hopes and these dreams and this is where I am instead. It was so hard. But yeah, that's what when he talks about the voice, that's what it reminds me of. And I think we all have that voice. And I would say to you, like, whatever that voice, your conscious, higher self, God, whatever you want to call it, whatever it's telling you in terms of where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do, you have to follow it. You have to. Or else it's just going to keep going. It's not going to stop. Because it's trying to nudge you to where you're supposed to be in life. Obviously, if it's telling you negative things, don't play into that, but there's always this little voice that's telling you the positive things you should do. You should open that door for that person. You shouldn't do this. Don't scream at that person. You should talk to this person. You should call this person. You should be doing this. You really want to, like, you gotta step into who you could be, because you have no idea the lives that you're supposed to touch and change. Like there might be somebody who's waiting on you, and until you step into who you're supposed to be, their life will go unchanged. Anyway, David Goggins, 1080, Joe Rogan Experience. I'm out.